Welcome to GenZ Talks. This is your host, Ryan Solomon, the head of community and content at Entre. At Entre, we built a social network for entrepreneurs, investors, creators, and freelancers. Every week, this show is recorded live on Entre, and I get to interview the most ambitious and young entrepreneurs and investors from around the world. And if you'd like to be a part of our next episode of GenZ Talks, maybe even get to come up on stage and ask a question, make sure to head over to joinentre.com and register for GenZ Talks. Now that that's out of the way, it's time to kick things off. Let's go. And I'm super excited to actually kind of dive into Utopia Labs because right as this I saw all the stuff about it, I started to dive a little bit more into DAOs over the past couple of weeks, as I'm sure a lot of people have been. And I want you guys to both kind of just give a brief introduction of like who you are, kind of a little bit of what you're doing, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into DAOs, what they are, and we'll dive a little bit more into like what Utopia Labs does for DAOs. So quick introduction about who you are, where you came from, and what you guys have worked on before.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll get right into it. But for me, I think I actually see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. What's up, JJ? Hope you're doing well, man. But for me, I came in from a kind of a background of just trying to come in from an understanding of what was crypto, even just like a year and a half back. So I wasn't like this ETH or Bitcoin OG. In fact, rather, I came into crypto hopefully with a fresh set of eyes. And I was just really interested in this idea of DAOs, governance. I was also just interested in typical DeFi projects and was just fell in love with this idea that, you know, blockchains give a business model of public goods. So from there, I started working at a smaller fund. Always knew that to a degree, I always wanted to operate and build. So met Alex as a co-founder. Like we didn't even think we were co-founders. We were just like having fun on Discord and building projects together, whether it was for smaller hackathons in Solana and ETH to a bunch of stuff. And that was an awesome experience. So from there, we kind of decided to take it as a whole. But that's a quick background on my crypto journey, what I've been doing now. And it's just been an awesome ride. And I think things have changed over time. So yeah, that's a quick background on myself. And I'll pass it off really quickly to Alex.
Cool. My name is Alexander, from Toronto, actually. I don't know if I kind of mentioned he's from Canada too, so we're both Canadian. As very similar to Kaito, kind of delve into crypto like later last year, early this year, just exploring a lot of the, rising tech and just saw a lot of potential in the space. I was actually in crypto pretty early, like 2017, 2018, during that bull run, but never actually kind of delved into the tech. Funny enough, I was just mainly like day trading. And so I think now actually like going into the building actually in the space is definitely a lot more fun.
Dude, I love that. I definitely the latest one here. I feel like I'm someone who's like, I feel like I have my grounding. You know what I mean? Like I can explain how Ethereum and Bitcoin and stuff works to people. Like I understand how NFTs work. I understand like the basics of DAOs, but like as soon as people start going to like, I don't know what the next layer deep is, but as soon as you start getting a little further deep on the technical side, I'm just like, okay, this is a little much for me. So I'm kind of learning myself. I definitely will say I started going down the rabbit hole probably a couple weeks ago, which has been really fun. So I've just been reading like Gabby Goldberg's Web3 resources, A16Z's crypto startup school. So I've just been like consuming as much content as I can in my free time. But I mean, I think this podcast is going to be probably really focused around DAOs. So I definitely want you guys to kind of give your own explanation of what a DAO is, because I think there's a lot of people that kind of have their own definitions and their own explanations. So if you guys want to take a shot at it.
Sure. Yeah. For me, one of my favorite definitions, and I think I just want to give credit to someone named Cooper Turley, who does great work within this landscape. But I love just, whatever twist you want to put it, but I think it's just an internet community with a shared bank account, a shared cap table. I think like that's really just the easiest description. And I think, you can unpack what each of these words mean, right? You could go from an internet community thinking that I met my co-founders on the internet, and actually funny enough, like that's how a lot of authentic connections are being built these days, whether it's for a variety of reasons. But I think really what it comes down to is that we were able to have a vision and a purpose and also just interests that aligned that you're able to meet online. And those types of connections are getting more strengthened. So that's like the internet community component. Shared bank account and shared cap table are extremely important as well. I think that is something where you're basically able to actually assign an asset towards an internet community. Because typically, when you look at traditional alternatives to how internet communities could actually use capital as a means of driving and creating a vision or purpose, you might have things like Kickstarter, you might have things like crowdfunding platforms, but there's a lot of things in regards to the shared bank account and shared cap table feature that are relatively and completely missing from these traditional alternatives, right? So I love the idea of transparency within these communities, which allows you to trust these communities. So it's a really cool kind of flywheel that's being built within what DAOs are, and that's probably the best way I would describe them and try to break them down each one by one.
Solid. Alexander, do you have another definition, or do you think he covered it?
Yeah. I think that was a pretty good take. I think I guess like one thing is I've been thinking a lot about the distinguishment between a company that runs on crypto rails and a DAO. I think that there's a spectrum between like what constitutes a DAO, what constitutes a company that just uses crypto and crypto native tools. That's still like a line that it's not really clear. It's still being drawn, and I think. Yeah, I guess like there's a few ethos that kind of surround DAOs, which are very kind of community driven, a flatter hierarchical structure, very open, and stuff like that. But yeah, I think generally how I like to describe it is a organization that kind of is built upon crypto native tools that allow people to cooperate together.
I love that. No, and I have really seen so for myself, it's actually really funny. I feel slightly embarrassed saying this. I opened my first wallet a couple weeks ago, as I started going down the rabbit hole, right? All my crypto was just on Coinbase, and I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna do this, I gotta actually start going through all this stuff. Maybe my first transaction was literally the Constitution DAO, which was hilarious, and I dropped I was like, all right, I'm gonna give $25, and it was like a $90 gas fee, which was heartbreaking. But we still did it anyway. I was like, you know what? If I'm going to learn, I just got to bite the bullet. This is how I'm going to learn how to do stuff in Web3 and crypto. So we did that. And also for me as our head of community and just seeing how communities are being built, and kind of really, really being passionate and being excited about DAOs, I definitely see a lot of problems with them right now. And I'm sure you guys do too. So I kind of want you guys to jump into the current problems that you're seeing with the way DAOs are structured right now and how Utopia Labs is going to kind of fit into solving those issues.
Yeah, I think Alex, do you want to take a stab at this one? I feel like you can bring in a really cool perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think right now DAOs. So one thing I think most DAOs today are quite small. The core team of it is probably in the tens, 10 to 20 to 30 people. I think at that size, I think it's pretty manageable to coordinate between everyone and to have a cohesive group of people cooperate together. But I think when a DAO scales up to anywhere from 100 to 1,000 to even more, a couple thousand, tens of thousands, that's when you start running into a lot of issues. Then you have to start worrying about, okay, how do I pay people? How do I actually coordinate between members? How do I see what people want to build and stuff like that. I think that's kind of what our product or our company's focused on, is really helping DAOs scale from these 10, 20 groups of just communities with a bank account to kind of an actual organization that can work towards something. That can work collectively towards something together. I mean, specifically, a lot of the problems we've seen have been revolving around payments and how do you coordinate payments between people, and that's kind of what our product focuses on at first. But really, it's just we're hoping to focus on any kind of problem, any kind of infrastructure that a DAO needs to scale.
Yeah, and just to quickly add on to that, I love that thought. I think there's 3 C's. What we can look into as challenges: compliance, compensation, and coordination. Those are the 3 things that could be worked towards or experimented towards in regards to better solutions that are at play. So, we're working towards certain solutions in some of the specific things I just mentioned, but I think there's just great experimentative models that can be implemented here. Those are, Alex just nailed it though in terms of that description.
I was gonna say, and also definitely the scaling aspect, like you said, whenever it's 30 people, it's really not that hard to manage. I'm also gonna be plugging your website in the room chat. They are hiring, by the way, founding designer and founding full stack engineer. So I want to plug that as well for anyone who might be listening to this afterwards. But no, I 100% agree. And I also see that it's just they're kind of using a lot of different products like, they were using probably for Constitution DAO, for example, they're using like, what was it, Juicebox, .money to collect all the money, and it just didn't seem like it was like super organized, which I also didn't expect it to be because it also started as a meme, right? And I'm really excited to see a lot more of DAOs that are kind of being much more serious, I guess. Ones that are like, I'm seeing stuff like Seed Club, there's MakerDAO, and then there's a bunch of other really, really exciting ones that are kind of coming into fruition. And for you guys are, whenever it comes to like compliance, I wanted to touch on that as well. Is that kind of coming around like incorporation for DAOs? Because that's where the legal side of things like gets really tricky, because the SEC doesn't know what they're doing, and I don't think anyone does 100% right now.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a stab at this, Alex?
Yeah, sure. I was going to say, I think a lot of DAOs right now we see are along the spectrum of, being really crypto native, or so like, for example, some DAOs are, like definitely like really against, even just accounting, or even like against taxes and regulation, and they're just paying in crypto and stuff, and very just kind of crypto native. Everything's decentralized, they're all anonymous. And there's the other end of the spectrum where there are DAOs that, have their own C Corps, pay like employee benefits, withhold taxes. They have like 10 lawyers that they talk to every time they make a decision to make sure they're fully compliant. So I do think right now there's a really large spectrum, that kind of these organizations exist on. I think I think right now the interesting thing is like we are kind of figuring out what that looks like. I know right now like Aaron Wright has been doing a lot of great work to figure out what that regulatory, how DAOs can actually fit into that new corporation model. But yeah, I think right now we're still the entire field is figuring this out as we go.
Did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think one line I like is that I think just as much as decentralization is a spectrum when it comes down to comparing it with L1 blockchains, you could always argue that layer one is more decentralized than another one. I think you could always understand and kind of argue that regulation is also a spectrum as well, in many cases. So that's kind of like the thought that I would have, where some are run completely on a gnosis safe and a multi-sig treasury without any legal wrapper, and then there's some that are being proactive, even though they might not be surrounded by a legal wrapper, but still preparing for accounting and doing these things like taxes and all that type of stuff, even though they're not legally wrapped. And then obviously on the very opposite end, there's the legal wrapper where they are, like Alex said, C Corps, employees, benefits, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, and to touch on that a little bit, for me, like, I think this is like a slightly controversial take, is that I do think regulation will actually benefit crypto, generally speaking, in some ways, right? Like if you overregulate, it's obviously going to mess everything up, and we don't want that. And we also don't want to pay any more taxes. But I think in the sense of like putting in legal structures that legitimize everything, right? Because the last thing I want to see, because what I'm actually very much afraid of is, like, you've seen all these people who have just like pumped and dumped shit coins. You've seen people that are just like throwing out garbage NFTs and just trying to make a quick buck, and then like ditch their entire community, and then their NFTs are worthless, right? And I think the same thing is going to happen with DAOs, right? I think with DAOs, you're going to see people that were like, hey guys, did you see that, Constitution DAO just raised $46 million from a bunch of strangers? Why don't we do that? Why don't we say we're going to buy the jets, right? And see how much money we can get. And then if it's all in crypto, we'll move it to all these wallets. Like that's the kind of stuff that I'm scared of. And I think the correct documentation and regulation will help prevent people from just throwing Ethereum or Solana, honestly, whatever currency that is, into random projects that they don't really know. Because I think there's a lot of people who are not educated on the space enough, and they'll make those mistakes. So that's kind of one thing that I want to touch on. You guys, we both unmuted. Alexander?
Yeah, for sure. I was just had a conversation about this earlier today, but it's like, I just don't see any regulatory body or Uncle Sam being like, hey, you know what, let's actually have less regulation in this space. So I think we're going to see increasing regulation. I think that could be expected at the entire kind of crypto field. I think it's pretty important to kind of figure out, what are the rules that actually make sense and what doesn't, because I think obviously a lot of the laws that exist today are quite archaic, and and don't really exactly map and or apply to, you know, a lot of the new technology that we're developing now. So yeah, it is a really interesting time to, you know, figure out. 'Cause I do think that it is a pretty big deal to figure out, you know, how to actually regulate these things in an effective way, and it's not just, you know, trying to fit old things into new technologies.
And to that point, imagine trying to tell our current politicians and explain to them what a DAO is, right? Like, I just don't think that they could comprehend like the things that they're even trying to regulate, which makes it even more difficult for them properly.
I'm not saying that I would disagree with that. I'd say maybe the majority wouldn't, but I think like there are pretty like smart people within the space that actually understand, like, you know, there's the Wyoming DAO law, for example. So there are legislators and there are people within just the government and political space that do understand some of the implications behind DAOs. And there's already laws that are working towards actually having a legal wrapper on them. So, you know, I'd say that that's a potentially a smaller amount that are educating themselves in crypto, but, you know, I'm still very optimistic, you know.
That's a good point. No, I do love that. And also, wait, can you touch on the Wyoming, what was the piece of legislation called?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of like implications behind the Wyoming DAO law, and I'm definitely not the best person to speak on this in regards to the legal implications. In regards to like what this means, in regards to this idea of liability, in regards to this idea that with some specific structures, you're only able to have 99 people as part of the certain legal wrapper. So I definitely am not able to explain it in full depth. I think there's better people to do that. I think Aaron Wright is probably a great person to look at in regards to the way he dissects and breaks down those types of laws. So that's like, sadly, I can't give that best response, but I think, you know, it's a step in towards the right direction. And I'm sure things like that regulatory and legal landscape will change over time.
No, you have a lot of really good points there. I think we're all on the same page of just like the right regulation is going to make sense, and having the right people. And I think your point too is like there definitely are people in the government. I think there's someone that we all look to is the mayor of Miami, Francis Suarez. Like, he's just so passionate about tech and crypto and Bitcoin. I think he's someone that a lot of cities need to look at personally. I wish Pittsburgh was like that, but we're slacking behind a little bit. But it's all right. We'll get through it. And then I wanted to jump into something else a little different. I wanted to jump into your fundraise a little bit. So one thing when I was looking into your fundraising is that you actually raised from a couple other founders of DAOs, like from Friends with Benefits and also from Syndicate DAO. So I'd love to hear you guys kind of touch on what your fundraising strategy was and why you had raised the amount that you did.
Yeah, sure. So just wanted to make sure, like, they're also just like angels as well, right? So like they're just like great people and great operators that we highly respect, and they definitely know their stuff. You know, Alex Zhang, who's a founder of FWB and a great operator, is someone I highly respect, and I think we're really grateful to have him on the cap table as well, right? So I think fundraising strategy wise, like there's a lot of things like generally that I think a lot of things can be taken into in terms of lessons. So the very first like thought that I had is, you know, doing an angel round is probably one of the best things to do, especially like before you approach a fund. Having great angels on board and having people who are independent thinkers who can make quick decisions are things that I highly respect with angels, and we're really grateful to have those types of people on board as well. But fundraising wise, it was awesome, man. I think people like Steve from Kindred are independent thinkers as well. One of the sharpest product minds that we've met, and we're just super grateful to have met him. So I think on that end, you know, in terms of the raise, it was just this way for us to initially, one, quit our jobs, two, have a degree of security, three, give us the ability to really move down here in SF as a team and start building out what we consider to be our dreams. And then four, also having kind of the ability to hire leniently. So, you know, we brought on people like Coinbase Ventures and a few other funds alongside angels and capital, and that allows us to kind of even move quicker. And I think capital allocation strategy wise, really the bottlenecks that we have and any startup typically has is this idea of engineering and product, right? So with a product and engineering based culture, the bottlenecks that you really want to fulfill are whatever that fits your contextual needs. But for us, you know, design and engineering ultimately are a 10x improvement in terms of leveraging our time towards product. So that's kind of the way I thought about the fundraise, and that's how our team thought about the fundraise. And getting operators and founders and on your cap table is definitely a great strategy. mostly due to this idea of empathy. They're able to understand exactly where you came from, exactly how you're making decisions. And also just kind of niching and verticalizing and specializing is also very important. So we had a pretty important focus on bringing in crypto native angels and crypto native investors. And that's been an awesome experience as well. So hopefully I answered the question of the fundraising experience. And that was just an awesome journey. And again, super grateful to have these types of people on board.
No, that was fantastic. And also having the guy from Friends with Benefits is super helpful because like he's also a customer and he understands your pain points too, right? So I think that was probably a smart play. And like you said, having people all being crypto minded definitely helps, obviously. And is there any challenges that you faced with the fundraise? Because I know you guys had done it relatively quick. Was it like a month?
Yeah, it was a pretty short period of time. Challenge wise, yeah, I think it just came from this idea of like, being overwhelmed throughout the experience as a first time founder. I think that's one thing, just being able to understand like there's a lot of like things that you just learn by doing. And I think, I can't really point to a specific experience, but I can say that it was a great learning lesson. And I think for me, it's just taught me a lot in regards to how to, portray the company. It helps us as a team also pitch the company and have a really good idea behind our vision. So a lot of those types of things and that exercise really helped. So challenge wise, I think it was just this idea of learning pains and being through it in a first experience. But those were the things that I would say were very helpful.
Got you. Alexander, do you have anything to add to that on the fundraise experience?
No, for sure. This is like obviously, as kind of mentioned, kind of like our first time doing this, and I think it just speaks to because Kaito was leading the fundraising. It just speaks to his his ability to really kind of sell it and fundraise and talk to people that we were able to raise as much as we did from the people that we did. So big shout out to him.
Absolutely awesome. No, whenever I saw that, I was like, let's go. And it's funny, whenever you guys raised, I was like, I don't even know what a DAO is yet. So I started doing like all the research and stuff. And it's funny because literally your fundraise made me start to kind of like poke around and see what was good, which is great. And it's funny, last time, I was looking at mine and Kaito's DMs, and the last time we talked before like setting this up, like I was like, yo man, what's been good with you? And you're like, dude, I'm diving so deep into crypto. Like that's the last message we had, and I just think it's super funny. But yeah, and then I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of your favorite DAOs that you're seeing right now and why. Maybe ones that you're a part of, or maybe ones that you're not. I think it's very difficult to keep up on everything, especially you being a founder for DAOs and then also trying to be a part of those communities yourselves. But which ones are some of your favorites that you think you'd like to plug, and why do you love those communities so much?
Yeah, sure. I think a few of ones that I found really interesting are, I think, Vector DAO and Developer DAO. They're kind of, I guess you could think of them as like kind of design or like development agencies. I think it's really cool because like it's very kind of like incentive aligned, because you have these group of like talented designers, talented developers that are getting together and contributing to a project. And as contributing, they're also being rewarded in that project native token, which kind of like has a lot of good incentive alignment, because now they're kind of more invested to actually grow and like provide great value for you. So that's like something that I thought was really interesting. Yeah, I'm sure Kaito must have other ones as well.
Yeah, Crow's House is awesome. Price is also in the audience and can probably speak pretty well about them. But Crow's House is awesome. They're trying to buy an NBA team, so I was a really big fan of just like the way they think about things. Their execution and their onboarding is A1. So Crow's House is awesome. There's a bunch of DeFi DAOs, which I really appreciate, just the way they handle things and the way they're kind of redefining what best practices look like. Index Co-op is amazing. Badger DAO ships product extremely well. So there's a bunch of really great DAOs that we've just been speaking to and just been able to meet that are awesome. I'm just looking through my Discord right now. ENS, really big fan of how they've been able to scale their domain and their kind of product strategy alongside tokenization. Nouns DAO is a really interesting experiment. Tokamak is also really cool. So as you can see, there's kind of a list that goes on. So really it's just finding, the DAO that fits your kind of vision, purpose, and your interests, and then just getting just an idea from there. It's almost like a vibe check, but Yeah, those are the DAOs that off the top of my head I really appreciate and I think are really interesting.
Love that. No, I'm seeing a lot of things that with like, I think the ones that are like kind of the most, not to say mission, I guess I'd say mission, not even in like the social side of things, just like they have a goal, they have something they want to accomplish, and it's very clear in their messaging, I think is really big. Like for Constitution DAO, it's kind of just a meme, but everyone knew like we're buying the Constitution, right? Vector DAO sounds super interesting. So then how does that work with them being an agency real fast? I wanted to break that down a little bit.
Sure. I don't know how much I could touch on it because I haven't kind of dug into their organizational structure too deeply. But from what I understand is you have a bunch of developers, or sorry, a bunch of designers collaborating together. And if they work for a project, for example, they would assign certain designers to work on this project. But they would have like a SAFT agreement or something like that where the tokens, they would charge in their native token. Those tokens will go into the Vector DAO's treasury. And then everyone who contributes or is a designer that is able to, contract with these projects, get a share of this equity, get the share of this treasury. So then, if the treasury is made up of, all these native tokens of a bunch of different projects, the DAO itself, the entire group, is kind of incentive aligned to help these organizations grow as well. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how it works. I don't want to make the mistake of, saying something wrong here. So yeah, definitely take that with a grain of salt. That's just from my understanding how it works.
No, you're good. That is super, super interesting. Because my thing with DAOs right now is like some of them are kind of feel like frats or country clubs to an extent, where I think some of them are on this like pay to play kind of front instead of play to earn, if that makes sense. Like I'm seeing a lot of things where it's just like, hey, buy this many tokens and you can join the Discord. And I'm like, I don't really know what this is, right? Which is like not my favorite thing, but seeing things like hearing more about Vector DAO and how they're kind of almost like an agency and they're paying out people in the DAO for contributing, I think that is a very interesting model. And I think more of those are going to come up. And that's kind of more on like the future of work side of things, where it's like, oh, I'm in 10 different Discords and I have like all these different projects that I can jump onto and get paid out for helping contribute towards different projects. That's where things get really, really interesting. And that's where you guys pop in and help make it easier for them. So super cool. And I want to jump to, so for both of you guys, what have been some of the biggest challenges you guys have faced so far with Utopia Labs? And for anyone who's in the audience, if you do have any questions, you can drop them in the in-room chat. I'll make sure to get to them. But what have been some of those biggest challenges that you guys have faced so far? How have you guys overcome, and what's everything looking like?
Yeah, happy to kind of break this one down. I think one thing that is really hard in crypto is signaling and separating the signal from the noise. Crypto kind of has this idea of digital tribalism, which is very interesting, mostly from this idea of just tokenomic incentives. One thing I think is important as a team, especially if you're in crypto, is being able to be really focused and have a bias towards action mentality. I think, it's very easy to raise money within, or not, I don't want to say easy, it really depends, but within crypto and the markets right now, in regards to fundraising, might be relatively easier to raise on crypto ideas than it was 5 years ago, right? So for us, I think at Utopia, the things that we try to remind ourselves every day is coming from an idea of just being biased towards execution more than this idea of ideation. Within this idea of like focus, I think one thing that we've been able to manage is that we get a ton of feature requests. There's a ton of new features that we could hypothetically build, but it's really coming in from this idea again of focus and really building a product feature that we think we have conviction in, early and iteratively testing and hypothesizing if it's valuable and going back to the drawing board. So I think that's like one of the hardest things in crypto specifically, just because there's such an opportunity space here that it's sometimes very difficult to basically manage a lot of those facets. And it's just like more of an execution liability than it is anything. So I'd say that's the biggest challenge, but I also feel like this can be outside of crypto too. There's always that market risk component as well. Like that's like the compliance. There's always like the regulatory like aspect that has a degree or need of degree of clarity. So those are a couple of things off the top of my head, but they're not super typical. And Alex might be able to touch on a few more points here.
Yeah, for sure. I think just building off that point, I think a lot of it has, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in this space. Like DAOs are still quite nascent. They're we're like the entire field or like the entire Web3 space is trying to figure out what DAOs are, and what kind of organization like structure they should form, what kind of like how they should be organized and stuff like that. And which means like we're trying to figure that out as well. So there is a lot of uncertainty. And as kind of mentioned, we just get a lot of these different feature requests, a lot of these different ideas that we ourselves want to build, and it's really has been a challenge at least to like figure out, okay, like what should we focus on? What is because that requires, like it's not just like market research. It's like you need a strong conviction in like a vision that you believe in, and just filtering out stuff that you don't think aligns with that. So that's been something that we've been trying hard to do to maintain focus, and to try to build something that we believe is actually the future, and not get drawn to these tangential pursuits.
Then whenever it comes to iterating, you might not be able to answer this one, so I can ask anyways. For roadmap, someone on Twitter replied to my tweet today. What does a roadmap look like for you guys? So if you guys can touch maybe on potential launch date, and also if you could touch on like what the 2 years, 3 years, 5 years looks like, if you're able to.
Yeah, for sure. I think for immediate roadmap, something we're working on right now is a V2 launch that kind of really improves our product by a lot, redesigns everything. UX is now, I think, personally speaking, like really amazing. Everything's seamless. So we're working on that in the short term. Longer term, we have a lot of ideas that we want to pursue, that we think are super promising. We want to get into, there are a lot of different verticals that we can go into as a company, because I think that is just so new right now. There's a lot of room to explore. Some of these verticals, could include like treasury management, can include tax compliance, regulatory compliance, can include accounting, financial analysis, organization, coordination. So there are a lot of these different verticals. We have a couple of ideas that we really want to dig into and are focusing on. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just seeing how customers interact with the product, and seeing where the space kind of goes into as well. Because being aware of like we are not the only player here, and being aware of like, okay, what are DAOs doing now, like, and being very like watchful at least for how things are trending towards.
Absolutely. Kaito, do you have anything to add to that? Nothing? Well, one thing I did want to add was I really hope, I'm not sure if this is on the roadmap way down the road or someone else is probably trying to build it. I hope that someone builds a better version of Discord catered towards DAOs. Because I'm sure you guys both are too, especially. Where's my Discord? I don't even know. I'm in so many channels right now, and I don't even have it open. And it's such a mess. And you also get all the spam messages as soon as you join a crypto-related Discord server. It's just not, I don't think it's the cleanest UI UX unless you're like, whenever I first joined, I was like, I don't like this. Like Slack is just like way cleaner. The replies are just like kind of funky. And also just like the way it's managed, I guess having bots and stuff is nice, but I'm not the biggest fan of Discord. And also from what I heard, whenever they had like that little sneak preview of you being able to connect their wallets, they got a lot of backlash. Then they kind of backed off from doing that. So if they're not planning on allowing you to connect wallets to Discord and actually have the underlying technology to properly host a DAO, like, do you guys think that someone else is going to take them over in the community space for DAOs?
Yeah, this is something that I think I've heard a lot of people touch on. I think they're all a bit frustrated with some of the things that Discord just doesn't support in terms of their DAO communities. I think Discord definitely has a lot of like insight, and has a lot of customers on there already. So they kind of have like the edge just to be able to understand exactly what other things they should build, and obviously with their existing tech. But I think it's very promising for, and like obviously with that whole MetaMask backlash, if they are actually fully stopping development, then I think that's a different startup could easily take them over. I think I'm excited to see how that goes actually, because I think that coordination on Discord has a lot to be desired for.
I absolutely agree with that. Kaito?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'd love to push back on that. I think Discord is actually pretty valuable for most DAOs. I could understand the use cases that like like one thing I'm a bit conflicted on is this idea that like DAO should just be like a newsfeed like model where like DAO simply post and like I don't know. I'm a bit conflicted on that idea of like news feeds being like the algorithmic way of how people interact with DAOs. I think messaging is a lot more intimate, but then there's also this idea of spam and totally makes sense. I think spam is something that can be solved over a period of time. So I'm a bit conflicted. I'm not quite sure. I think there's obviously a positive and healthy community right now. But that always means that there are going to be communication protocols that might try, eating Discord's lunch. But I don't have any specific thoughts here in regards to just this idea of who's going to win or if there is going to be a space here.
One of the things that I've been chewing on, it's kind of related to Vector DAO and also just some of the other ones I've joined, is like I see a lot of DAOs, in my opinion, in the future kind of like merging into, I guess, in real life settings. Right. So to make like this hypothetical example of like, there already is a climate DAO. I actually didn't join it. But if there's something really, I guess we're going to use that as an example. If climate DAO had put out a task for everyone to like go recycle 10 bottles of water or something like that, 10 water bottles, or go pick up litter or something like that. And then you go and do that in real life. And then you have to prove that you did that to be paid out in tokens. For me, I think Discord doesn't have, I mean, you could work around and do an Airtable or some funky thing. But kind of what I was thinking was like, okay, if I wanted to prove that I did something like that, like an in real life piece of work, like I could take a video of myself doing that and then upload it. And then other people who are in the DAO could verify those. I guess you could say, if you want to use Ethereum as an example, they could verify the transactions. They would get paid out for verifying that I did it. And then I would get paid out for actually having done the work itself. And I think that proof of work model is one thing that's missing. I don't think it's a core component for what is necessary for DAOs. I think it's a core component of what could be needed for specific niche DAOs. Because like it depends on the definition you give. With the definition that you had used at the beginning was like just a big community that has a treasury, an open source treasury that everyone can see and everyone's a part of and has a cap table. You don't necessarily need this whole proof of work model, but I do see it being a component of what could make DAOs kind of actually connect to the real world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was just processing that. Yeah, I was looking at JJ's comment here, is this idea of on-chain oracles. Yeah, oracles are interesting. It's basically just being able to optimize for accuracy in regards to data sources, right? So there's a lot of really cool things. I think one person that you obviously have to shout out when it comes down to this idea of oracles is Balaji, who talks a lot about how media can actually be really interesting in regards to how it intersects with oracles, and what if you put media on chain, what if you put a lot of these types of things on chain. I think the implications are very interesting, but I haven't looked too deeply into that myself. But I think there's, again, like you touched on, there's several use cases there.
No, 100%. I've been looking into Chainlink and how that is actually going to come to be, and actually proving real world data. It's a really, really interesting concept. And it's some of the concepts I'm seeing as I dive down the rabbit hole are just like mind-boggling. And a question from JJ was another question. He said another question I'd have is how protocols like Helium and Render play into the DAO landscape.
Yeah, so we actually have gone or as a team, we thought a lot about different chains and how what we should prioritize. I think yeah, we've given a lot of thought about this. We haven't really come to a super solid conclusion, but I think for us it's just like we're trying to service DAOs, and we don't really care what chain they're on, or what kind of they're using on the back end to facilitate their organization. So yeah, I think to push out the multi-chain future kind of thesis. I think right now we're kind of more focused on exactly servicing DAOs as they are, and not really focusing on exactly what chain they are on. But I don't know if I can speak to exactly those two chains too deeply, because I'm not too familiar with exactly, I haven't given much thought exactly how they impact DAOs exactly.
Yeah, I think Helium, I don't think Helium's a chain, Alex. I think Helium is it's like the hotspot Wi-Fi network, or maybe it is its own chain. You probably dug into this, but this is actually like I haven't looked into Helium too often, so I probably wouldn't be the best person to speak on that. Is Helium a chain? Sorry, it's more of a question now. Interesting. What's Render? I actually don't know what Render is. Again, crypto moves way too quickly here. If you could drop the links for when you mention these projects, that would be great. The fastest way to host all your static sites. Unified cloud. Okay. Yeah, I probably am not the best person to touch on it now that I just learned about this space.
Yeah, no, it's very, that's the one thing I've learned too, is everything moves honestly in like a week to week basis of what's hot, what's people talking about, and what's new what's new, what's old. And it's honestly very, very crazy. And I also wanted to put out there for a question for both of you guys. What is kind of like if you have one, maybe you don't, what is kind of like a big, bold prediction that both of you guys have around DAOs? I know, I forget who it was. It was, I saw Greg Eisenberg from, I forget what his fund is called. It's gonna make me so mad, but you know who he is. Late checkout, there it is. He put out a tweet a while ago saying that like DAOs are gonna replace like corporations and everyone's just gonna work at DAOs instead of like having normal jobs. And all like a huge slew of things. I thought it was really, really interesting. And I wanted to ask you guys what your thoughts and predictions are for the future of DAOs and what you think it might look like 10, 20, 30 years into the future. It's a tough question.
Yeah, sure. I think for myself, I'm giving this a lot of thought actually, especially like how DAOs kind of impact us politically, economically, and even socially. I think my conclusion is like I think DAOs allow for a lot quicker and more efficient experimentation in different incentive structures, in different organizational structures, in different ways people cooperate in general. I think that experimentation will probably yield, I hope it'll yield new and better ways to cooperate than the traditional corporation structure we have today. So I think in reality, like really, it's just like the tool allows people to play around with what kind of like hierarchical structure. Like most companies today are a pyramid structure. You have the owner or CEO at the top, and it just goes down from there. And the classic governance structure is the same way. You have decisions made on the top and they trickle down. And I think I could hypothesize on what the future corporation structure, incentive structure, or governance structure is, but I think that the real power of DAO is that it allows for a lot more experimentation, so that you can actually start playing around with it. Okay, like what structure actually makes sense, what incentive mechanism makes sense to have a really effective corporation that scales across the entire world. So yeah, that's, I don't know if that is a bold prediction, but I think DAOs just kind of like allow that iteration to happen at a quicker pace, more effective pace, and hopefully from that we'll see something new arise.
Absolutely, and I think you kind of touched on the fact of it's just gonna be a bunch of like little, like I like to the point you were making is like I see it almost as like a bunch of mini experiments that are happening, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think my thought was really arising from the fact, like I was wondering, okay, like are the future of corporations going to be a flat hierarchical structure where everyone owns a significant portion of the equity and all decisions are made autonomously and through like democratic votes? And I just wasn't certain. I just don't know if that is actually an effective way to cooperate between people. I think we could maybe sit down and big brain what the most effective way to cooperate is, but I think ultimately DAOs allow people to experiment with this. So there could be a DAO that has that kind of structure. There could be a DAO that doesn't, and these experimentation will just lead to different results and see which one can actually be more effective for people to get together and work towards a common goal.
Oh, that was a good answer. And Kaito, do you have any big bold predictions for DAOs?
Yeah, I think it's very easy for a lot of people now to say I think that DAOs are going to be next LLC or C corp. I think really what it comes down to is answering the question why, and I think Alex touched on a great why, which is this idea of scaling human coordination costs, right? I think think if you want to look at it from a different angle too, DAOs are an experiment towards this idea of scaling democratic, economic, and societal systems, right? And I think that's a really powerful component, where you're able to, in a global permissionless format, you're able to start an organization that is, in some senses, contractually agreed upon within members to basically work towards a single vision or purpose. And I think when you compare that to the traditional LLC or C Corp, I think you can start it down 5 to 10 minutes versus starting an LLC or C Corp, whatever, how long that takes. Delaware, I think, might be 2-3 days. Other DAO, other, incorporation tools and incorporation abilities might take a week. And then hiring, going through all those types of things are very interesting. And I think, again, they're just an experiment towards this idea of going from ideation to execution way quicker than the traditional equivalent. So I think, other than the thought that I do believe that DAOs are going to be the next C Corp and LLC, I do think there's a couple of reasons and a couple of impactful reasons of why I think that's the case. I think I gave a quick outline there, but happy, like, that's a separate conversation in itself. So yeah.
You can touch on it a little bit. I'd love to hear why. I want to hear why you think that, though.
Yeah, well, I think again, like, I think you have the ability is, like, walk me through any other model in regards to any certain governance structure where you're able to have anybody in the world join on your very first day of starting your DAO, and then 2, having them economically and incentively aligned, 3, giving them this idea of liquid ownership at a tap of a button, and then 4, this idea that work shouldn't be based on the amount of time you spend, but the quality of work that you push out. So I think, it fulfills a lot of these kind of use cases. And I think crypto is just revolutionary in of itself because it revolutionizes this idea of liquid ownership, right? And I think that's probably the most powerful thing, where you're able to give a person a token, which represents, in some cases, a part of a project, which has a degree of value. And I think as soon as you do that, it's very powerful, because then people are incentive aligned to increase the value of the network itself and do great work. So I think a lot of those types of incentive mechanisms are very, very powerful, and crypto is a great way to spearhead that and streamline that process. And I think that's why crypto in of itself is very powerful, but then DAO specifically, in the way people accumulate capital, make decisions off of capital, are also really powerful. So that's kind of like the way I would look at it. And there's a really great kind of chart, and when it comes down to this idea of comparing a DAO versus a C Corp. Alex touched on a couple of the things, whether it's the hierarchical structures, whether it's this idea of transparency. There's a lot of really cool components there. So those are kind of like, that's like my running thoughts and notes.
I love that answer. JJ literally read my mind. He put in the group chat, he said, clip that. And I was like, absolutely. That was a great answer. And I'm definitely going to rewatch this as soon as we have this live. And probably throw that up on Twitter, Instagram, and everywhere else. So be on the lookout for that. We're almost up here on time. If anyone has any other last questions, last question I want to ask is just a little bit more on a fun side of things before we do wrap up for both of you guys. What is something that most people don't know about you? Because like I feel like Twitter and just like startup stuff, like I feel like everyone just kind of knows each other based off of their startup and like the 1 or 2 conversations they had. What is something that most people don't know about each of you?
I can't code too well, so that's one thing. Alex, I know you're laughing there on mute. Yeah, I can't. I'm a non-technical founder, I'd say. That's one thing I think is worth knowing for me on the business side. On the other side, big fan of playing basketball. I think big fan of reading. I like watching movies as well. So I'm pretty normal on that end as well. Now that I'm just trying to read them out loud and think about them. But yeah, I'd say like that's like the funniest thing about me, I guess. It kind of sucks, but we'll see how it goes.
Alexander?
No, I mean Kaito's not technical, but I mean he's been a huge value add. I've yeah. On my side, people don't know about me. Yeah, I guess like I wasn't actually like I've never had like real product experience before, like on that lens as well. I was mainly like an engineer and had to kind of like pick up a lot of these like design and product skills along the way. So kind of shifting my skill sets a little bit just because of the necessities of a startup and other things that don't know. I love traveling, I like death-defying experiences. Weird enough. So something that's like, I think I'm a bit of like a adrenaline junkie. I like, having these experiences that where I like brush down.
Noted. Noted.
What else? Alex and I live in the same room right now. We're bunk bed roommates. Our team lives in like the same co-living house in San Francisco, which is fun. That's another thing that's been awesome. So we've definitely just been we've been in close quarters just the past few months, and it's been an awesome experience though.
No, it's a good time doing that. Myself, Michael, who's in the audience, and probably another team member or two will probably be down in Austin this winter. So if you do pop into Austin, make sure to hit us up.
Yeah, we'll do. Well, one funny story that no one knows actually except for our team is that Kaito actually pitches in his sleep.
No.
Yeah, so yeah, at night he'll sleep talk and start doing the Utopia Labs pitch.
That's great.
Honestly, it's like I'm not proud of it, to be honest. I wish I could just sleep, but I've even introduced Alex sleep talking in terms of pitching. So that's been it's definitely interesting. Price could give you the full story actually, where he actually heard it, checked his phone, and realized that it was like 3:45 in the morning. So it's a good experience, I guess. Yeah.
That is hilarious. That Michael put in the chat. He said, "Omeo, sleep pitching. That's when you know you're a real entrepreneur." And we got one more question before we wrap up because we got a couple more minutes. JJ said, "Still interested about DAO go-to-markets, retro airdrops, anything else?" So, what have you guys seen as like a really successful go-to-market strategy for someone who's launching a DAO? And honestly, you guys can even touch on your go-to-market strategy as well a little bit if you want.
Yeah, I think retroactive airdrops are very interesting right now. New best practices are being established after each airdrop. You can look at a bunch of great case studies on how you should implement an airdrop. And I don't think anyone's actually really figured it out. And I feel like Paradigm might have written a bit about it, of how you can optimize it, right? But a couple examples is ENS has done a great airdrop. There's situations with another DAO, Paraswap, that had a bunch of rules in regards to who can get the airdrop, depending on the usage, depending on if you had, if it wasn't a burner account, if you interacted with other projects. So I think what's going to be interesting is that there's probably going to be some sort of tool that makes it very easy to filter if this, then that. So, for an example is if JJ interacted with Utopia's software, then he gets one Utopia token. But I think it can get more advanced in terms of the query and parameter filtering of how that could look like in a way that incentivizes contributors and users. So I think there are going to be tools. I think right now it might be using Open Zeppelin contracts and working from that angle. But hopefully that answered your question about how DAO should go to market in terms of retro airdrops. I think very contextual across the different verticals within DAOs. With DeFi DAOs, obviously, there's different situations as there versus maybe social DAOs, which might have a different situation as well in terms of best practices being established. So hopefully that helps. But I think, the days are gone for just interacting once with a protocol and expecting a ton of tokens. I think DAOs are starting to learn, and DAOs are starting to understand that. And I think there's going to be tiered contribution levels, and basically there's going to be on-chain filtering mechanisms to make sure that's optimized.
Really solid answer. We got one last quick question from Juan Perez. He says, how are the features different from other existing tools like Parcel, CoinShift, Llama, Coordinate, etc.? How do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah, I think Alex and I will touch on this, but we got a lot cooking up, and I think you'll have to see for V2. That's the way I would look at it. Alex, anything else you want to add on your end?
For sure. I mean, honestly, I think we don't actually view these people as too much, or these different projects as too much as competitors. I think right now there's just so much open space for things to explore. As I mentioned, there's just so many verticals that need to be tackled for DAOs to actually have the infrastructure to scale up. And I think we are CoinShift, Parcel, and us, and a lot of the other projects as well are kind of finding our way to our own spaces. So I don't think maybe right now some of the features might overlap, and that can be viewed as somewhat of a competitors. But I think ultimately there's just so much open room here, and we're all kind of finding our own positions in the space. So yeah,
I think crypto is such a positive sum game here. Like Alex touched on, I was just joking. I think there might be, again, like Alex touched on, some feature overlap, but I think we have different product visions and different focuses. And I think regardless, if we can just push this space forward of helping scale DAO infrastructure, then we've done our job. And I think that's really the way we look at it. How do we build off these one-off composable tools that can kind of, automate and identify and ideally codify a lot of the manual processes that we see with DAOs today. So that's kind of the problem-oriented mindset that we approach every day with, and then just kind of build product from there.
Love it. And I'm super excited. If there's any way that the Entre community can help, please hit me up. Or if you ever need any product feedback, I love doing that. Love giving any feedback I can. But I'm going to be dropping your link again into the chat, utopialabs.com. Make sure to check it out, people. They got some job openings. Kaito, Alexander, thank you guys so much for taking an hour and hanging out with me. I really do appreciate it. I think the people in the audience really appreciate it. Make sure to give some clapping emojis for people who are hanging out in the audience, to our incredible speakers. If you guys have anything, last words, to piece of advice or anything that you want to call to action before we wrap things up.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I think the one little piece of advice I'd give, I don't think I'm in a place of giving advice at all, but the one thing I've learned is by working hard, you can increase your surface area of luck. And I think that's something that always rings true. I think just by working smart, I don't think I could work smart at the age of 21 or 19 or 20. I think I just don't know what I don't know. But if you're able to work hard, I think you can increase your surface area of luck. And I think there's some really cool opportunities once you do that. So that's what I would suggest for any of the aspiring builders out there.
Yeah, for sure, John. And yeah, I want to thank you again for hosting this conversation. This is really great. Just plugging in. We are hiring engineers, so I'd love to, if you think DAOs are exciting, if you think Web3 is exciting, and I think we have a really amazing team that you'd love to join. Just plugging that in there too.
Absolutely. Hey, if you post it here on Entre, I'll make sure that it goes out in our newsletter. So if you post your job on Entre, I'll make sure to get it out to our whole community for you guys for hanging out. Awesome.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Ryan.
Absolutely. Alrighty, gents. Really appreciate you guys popping on. Everybody, make sure to give them both a follow and check out Utopia Labs and check them out on Twitter and everywhere else that they are hanging out. If you want to start a DAO, these are the people to go to. So thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your night. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of GenZ Talks. Make sure to connect with me and thousands of other entrepreneurs, investors, and creators over at joinentre.com. Or you can download our mobile app for both iOS and Android. Also, don't forget to follow us on social at Join Entre.